Hello and welcome to the third video in our Ansible automation basics. Okay, so we're going to work through Ansible workbook number 3 now. As you can see, we're still using the exact same topology we was using before. So if we have a look at our scenario, so your manager has requested that you provide basic IPv4 addressing on all the router interfaces in preparation of further advanced configurations, which we will do in later workbooks. Okay, so the task is to either create or reuse an Ansible host file with all the routers included in it. Then the next task is to write a playbook that will configure the loopback addresses on the edge routers, so R1, R2, R3 and R4, with the schema of 100.100.100.x/32, where x is the actual route number, i.e. 4, 3, 2 and 1. Once that's been done, the next task is to create a playbook to verify your configurations. And then once you've done that, we need to build, that should be build an interface YAML file that contains the physical interface IP addresses and the loopbacks for the named routers. We can leave the edge loopbacks out because we'll sort that out later on. Okay, and then the next task is to create a playbook that will iterate over our interface file and apply the IP addressing and bring the interfaces into the up state. And then the last task is to verify the configurations that we've done. Okay, so relatively simple what we need to do on this. Basically, what we're going to do the loopbacks on these devices here. So we're going to create a playbook to do the loopbacks on them. Then we're going to verify to make sure that the loopback configurations have gone on. And then once we've done that, we are going to create another playbook which is going to iterate over an inventory file or a router file to configure all of these interfaces here and bring them into the up state. And then we're going to use another playbook to verify that our configurations have actually worked. Okay, so let's get cracking with this and see what we can come up with. Okay, so we jump into our handy VS Code. As I've said before, you can use any IDE of your choice, and let's see what files we currently have available at the moment. So we have router interface.yaml file, which we will go through shortly. We have our basic Ansible config file and our host. Now, it did actually state in the tasks you can reuse the host, so you don't have to sit there and create it from scratch. So if we have a look at the hosts, I have, in terms of routers, I have London, Manchester, Asia and America. In terms of the edge routers, I've got R1, R2, R3 and 4. We have the IP addresses of each of them, and each of those groups have their own variables as well. So within the first video and the second video, within the lab files on GitHub, there is the host files for both of those, so you can just merge them together, not a problem, unless you want to write them out. If you're a glutton for punishment, the whole idea of automating is to make things faster and easier. So if you can copy and paste something, then yeah, copy and paste it. However, while you're learning, I did find when I was learning Ansible that manually typing your playbooks, manually typing things out, gave you muscle memory of what you was actually doing. Okay, so let's close that down. We don't need the hosts at the moment. So what we're going to do, we're going to create a playbook to configure the loopback addresses. Now this should be quite interesting, and later on when we do the main actual routers, the named routers, we will expand upon this. We'll do it in a slightly different way. The reason we've chosen this first is because the edge routers are named as R1, R2, R3, R4. So there's a variable within the host name that we can actually take. Whereas with the named routers, there's no actual numeric variable that we can actually use on that. So let's create our first playbook for this task. Let's do a touch and let's do add loopback.yaml. Okay, and let's open that up there. So I'll add loopback.yaml and let's get cracking with this. So you'll see now that I'm doing 3 dashes. Now this is actually the industry standard. What the 3 dashes at the beginning of a YAML file, and it doesn't matter what YAML file it is an indication to a system that passes it that it is actually a YAML file. As you've seen before, we don't actually have to do it. It is literally just best practice. Okay, so let's give it a name and we're going to call it loopback. Fantastic. All right, so we're cooking with gas now. So the host is going to be our edge devices. Remember formatting. Okay, now gather facts we don't want. Gather underscore equals no. Now in this case, what we're going to do, we're actually going to put the connection, what the connection method is, even though it is expressly defined in our host file, we'll put it in anyway, because you may find that in future you may not be working with host files that have the connection type automatically set. So therefore you can get used to actually typing it into your actual playbooks. Okay, so let's do a connection, and it's going to be network underscore CLI. Okay, so that is the start of our playbook. Let's do the tasks. And remember, indentation is important. Give it a name. And let's call it add loopback to edge routers. Okay, fantastic. All right. Okay, so now what we're going to use the Cisco iOS.ios underscore config module. So cisco.ios.ios underscore config. And now we're going to give it the lines that it needs to do. Now we put in our actual commands. So let's do interface loopback 0. Okay, so we're normally when we're on the CLI, we're normally just used to doing LO0 or LO tab and then 0. When you're writing it out in your YAML files for your playbooks, it's best to put the actual loopback or the interface names in as they should be. Okay, so interface loopback 0, and we're going to do IP address, and it's going to be 100.100.100. Now this is where it gets somewhat interesting. So instead of doing the actual, what we normally do is put a numeric value in there, we want it to actually get the inventory host name and use that instead. So we're going to use a Ginger template for this, or as you can see, or well, it's kind of a Ginger template. Okay, so we're going to do inventory underscore host name. So this is going to pass our inventory file, which is our host, and it's going to take the host name. But if we leave it as it is, then it's going to try and apply R1, R2, etc. to the actual IP address, and we know that's an illegal operation, so we can't do that. So what we need to do, we need to do a Python split command to tell it to ignore the first character in the actual host name, or in the string I should say, and just return the starting from the second character onwards. So if you had, for example, host R24, R391 or something, even though you couldn't use that as an IP address, but even so. So what we're going to do, we're going to do square brackets, we're going to do 1: and square that off again. Okay, so now what you should do, it will pass the actual inventory, it will take the host name, it will ignore the first character, and it will take the second and the other characters after it for the actual host name, in which case we've got single digits. So that's exactly what we want. Okay, and then we need to put our subnet mask in there, which is 255.255.255.255. Okay, now what we can do, we can put a description if we want to, and I'm just going to call it edge loopback. Okay, that's absolutely fine. And then we want it to be, well, we don't really need a no shut on this. We can do a no shut. Yeah, why not do a no shut anyway? We'll be using that in another playbook. Okay, so that is our actual playbook done. All right, so let's save that. And let's confirm that we can actually get onto our devices. So let's do ansible space ping. Let's just do edge. So just ping the edge routers. Okay, so we can successfully connect to the routers, so that's absolutely fine. So let's run this playbook, but quickly before we do that, let's have a look on, where are we? Let's have a look on R1, just out of curiosity, just so we can see. IP interface brief. Okay, so we can see there's no loopback there. Brilliant. Okay, so let's try this. It's an Ansible playbook, and we called it add loopback.yaml. Let's see what happens now. This shouldn't take too long. Okay, so you notice here that we've got changed, so it's made changes on R4, R3, R2 and R1. Okay, so everything's fine as it says there, and we made a change. So let's have a little quick little look. Well, actually we can see here that it's done the loopback. So there we have loopback 100, but that's not what was actually asked of the task. The task didn't say go onto the command line and actually double check your findings. It said do an actual playbook to check this. So what we'll do, we'll create another playbook. So let's do touch, and let's call it show interface.yaml. Yep, brilliant. Okay, all right, so let's open that one up. Show interface.yaml. Brilliant. Okay, so let's create our playbook here. So again, we'll do our 3 dashes as seen as their best practice, and let's do our name, show, and let's do our hosts. Now, if you remember, we used the actual edge for hosts, but we don't have to do that. We can actually type them out if we want to. So we can do R1 colon R2 colon R3 colon R4. So we can do it this way if we want to, which is absolutely fine and dandy if we want. So now we're going to disable the gathering of facts. So gather underscore is nope. Brilliant. Okay, and we're going to put connection network underscore CLI. Again, as I said, you don't actually have to do this because it is defined in the host file. And let's do our tasks. Okay, brilliant. So let's do our name for the first one. Well, actually, it's not the first one. We're only really doing, well, we're kind of like doing 2 little plays in this. You'll see that in just a moment. Okay, ignore those strange little E's. They come up when I press a particular key on my graphics tablet to pause the video so I can have a cough. Okay, so name, we'll call this confirm interface. Brilliant. Okay, and we're going to use the, whereas before we used the Cisco iOS commands, you know, we're going to use the actual command here rather than the config command, because we're going to just do show commands on here. So let's do cisco.ios underscore command, and let's put in our commands. Brilliant. So we're going to do let's do a show interface description. So we get the interface description first, and let's do a show IP interface brief, include up, because when you really want to see what's up. Okay, brilliant. So unlike pushing out an actual configuration, we want to see the actual output of what's going on. So what we need to do, we need to register the actual output of this. So we need to do the register command. Now don't put it under the command section because that will fail. You need to stick it under the next hierarchy right there under Cisco iOS, not under the actual commands. So let's do register and let's just call it output. Now you'll find as you start doing more and more tasks within your playbooks, you'll be changing the variable that you use for output, because if you keep using the same one as just output, then every time you call that variable it's going to overwrite, and that's not something you actually want. Okay, so that is that done. So what we need to do is now another task, because we want it to actually print the actual output. Okay, so let's do name, just double checking that the dash is in the right spot, which it is. Great stuff. And we're going to call it display output. Okay, fantastic. We need to go in a couple now. So we're going to do debug and go in another two and message. And this time we're going to use our quotations. We're going to do our curly brackets. And then we're going to do output, which output again is just the variable. Had we changed the name to something else, actually let's do that rather, seeing as just so you can see what I'm talking about. Output YouTube. There we go. So we're going to call it, it's going to register in the variable of YouTube. So YAML, so it's youtube.std out underscore lines. Okay, and that's it. That is our complete playbook now. So we're going to run a show IP interface brief, including up, and show interface descriptions. Let's give that a bash and see what happens. So ansible-playbook and show interface.yaml. Okay, here we go. So we can see that it's done two tasks on each of the devices, which is exactly the first task is to run the show commands. The second task is to actually show the output in the terminal. So let's have a little look. So we can see that we have loopback 0 there with on router 1 with the IP address .1. For router 2, we have loopback 0 and the IP address .2. We can also see the descriptions here as well. And .3 for router 3 and .4 for router 4. So I would say that was completely successful. Fantastic. Okay, let's have a quick look at our actual router interface YAML file that I've created. So basically this is in YAML format. It's got every individual device like router 1, router 2, Manchester, etc. It's got the switches, but we're going to ignore those. I've not put any IP addresses on them yet. Or actually, we've not put any IP addresses on them yet. But we're not going to call these in our actual playbooks. The playbooks get called against what's in the host file, and the switches are not in the host file, so it's not a problem. So we can see that we have F for interface. We have the names Gig Ethernet 01, 01, 02, Gig Ethernet 4, etc. You have to type it in this way, and you have to make sure you put a space between the name of the interface and the actual interface number, otherwise you'll get a failure. I put a description in there for each interface. I put an IP address in there and a subnet mask, and it's basically followed all the way down on all of the devices. Now in terms of R4 and R5, I've not put the loopbacks in because we've already configured the loopbacks on the edge devices, whereas in Asia, Manchester, London and America, we've got the interfaces there as well. So what we're going to do, we're going to create a playbook that will sit there and it will iterate through this file. It will take the variables from the each of these interface, description, IP and mask. It'll apply them to the actual device itself, and then it will do a no shut on them as well to actually make sure that they're all brought back up. All right, let's get cracking with this. So let's create another file. Let's call it touch, and we'll call it named name.yaml. All right, let's get our name.yaml up. Okay, so remember, we start off with the industry standard, 3 lines, and we're going to call it a name. So let's do name, configure main routers. Okay, and hosts. Now in this case, I'm going to select all on this. So it will take everything that is in our host file, which is our routers, so our main routers, and it will take the edge files, edge routers as well. So gather facts we don't want to do. Gather facts is no, and we can do our connection again. Network underscore CLI. Now this is something new that you've not seen before. So vars underscore file. So this is telling us, or it's going to tell the playbook to look for a file, and we're going to give that a name here. So the vars file is going to be router underscore, is capitalization is key, interfaces.yaml. all right, actually, did I put that with a lowercase or a uppercase? Yeah, that's fine. All right, brilliant. So let's do our tasks. So our task, we're going to use the Cisco iOS config after we do our name. So we do our name, and then we're going to use the config module. All right, so let's do our name, and let's do configure interfaces and no shut. Brilliant. So cisco.ios underscore config. Excellent. And now we tell it what lines we want it to actually do, and make sure there's no spaces in. That's exactly what we want. Lines. Okay, so now we're going to do interface. So basically we're in configuration mode, we're typing in interface, but now what we need to do, we're going to use the same templated thing like we done earlier on to a point. So we're going to do our two curly braces, and we're going to do item, and the item is located in the INTF. So remember when we looked at the actual router interfaces, INTF item is what's in there. So this is the item, and this is the key. This is the key. That's the pair. All right, let's go back to named. All right, so that's the first line that we need to do, and let's do our description, and it's going to be exactly the same as what we've done before. So our 2 squirrely braces, and the item is description. The item dot DESC. So it's not that difficult when you get used to actually doing it. And our next command is just going to be a no shutdown. All right, so that will get our interfaces. It will bring them into the actual up state. So that's exactly what we actually want it to do. So now we need to configure the actual IP addresses on there. So name, and we're going to call this configure IP, and maybe put in the, there we go. So configure IP, and we're going to use the same Cisco iOS config. So cisco.ios underscore config. Brilliant. And now we need to tell it what commands we want it to do. So we do our lines, and our first line is going to be interface, and then we do our squirrely braces again. So we have our squirrely braces, and it's going to be item interface. Okay, and space there, and that's all we need for that line. And then we're going to do the IP address now. Oops, sorry. Yeah, that's a bit better. So we're going to do IP address, and we're going to take it from the item IP and then the item mask as well. So let's do our two squirrely braces and item dot IP, and then do a space, and then we're going to do the subnet mask as well. Item dot mask. Okay, so that's all we need for that. So now what we need to do, we need to tell it to actually loop, because otherwise it's just going to do one device and that's it. We want it to loop through all of the actual devices that we have in that particular group. Sorry, excuse me. Yeah, so what we need to do, we need to tell it to actually loop it now. So we go back to underneath the Cisco stanza, and we're going to do loop, and we're going to do a quotations for that, and we're going to do our squirrely braces again, the squirrely braces, and then we're going to do interfaces, and then what we're going to do, we're going to set like a dictionary on this. So we want to create an actual dictionary for us. So there's the actual dictionary sign for that. Inventory host name is what we want. Inventory underscore host name. Okay, fantastic. Move across one. And then what we want to do, we need to do a pipe on that, and then do default. And then we need to do we need to close the actual parenthesis on that. So we do a, if I remember rightly, that there we go. That should do nicely. Fantastic. So that's our actual loop, which is what we want. And then we need to do a when statement. Remember our indentation. So item.ip is defined, and our other statement for our item mask. So item.mask is defined. Okay. Now, this looks like it's a little bit complicated what we're doing here, but you need to remember is that once you've done this once, now you'll be able to, hammer this out as much as you actually like. And oh, I forgot the there we go, that's better. You'll be able to run this against as many devices as you actually like. All right, so let's save that and let's run that and see how that gets on. Okay, let's have a look. Just wait for this to go. Oh, here we go. Now we can see it's making some changes. We can go and verify this in a minute. Okay, the video was paused briefly because I got a massive error spike when I run the actual command. But the reason why is, if you look here, I actually forgot the actual loop for the first task. And loop the second task, they was like, oh yeah, look at us, we're going to loop it. I forgot to put it on the other one, so it ended up failing. But now that I added in the actual loop, it looks like this has gone through. It's made lots of lovely changes, which is exactly what we like to see. All right, fantastic. So let's verify this. So let's go back to our show interfaces, and instead of running it against the host, let's run it against all this time, so we can see what we can see on this one. So let's save that, and let's do a show interfaces YAML and see what's going on with this. So what we're expecting is our 1, 2, 3, 4 to actually have the Gig Ethernet interface IP and up, and we're expecting other interfaces to be up on the named ones. So let's scroll up to the top of the command and see what we can actually find. Okay, so we can see that it's connected okay to everything. So on which device is this? So we can see here that interface is on R3. So we're on R3. Yeah, that's fine. So G1 is up, but we can see all of our descriptions, which is exactly what we expect. We can see our IP addresses that the interface is up, so that's brilliant. So it looks like everything is turned out fine. Proof is in the pudding though, where we jump onto the actual CLI itself. Oh, we can see lots of good things on there. Let's do a show IP interface brief. Okay, so we can see that now that we've configured the loopback. We configured Giga Ethernet 1, 2, and 3. No, sorry, no, 1, my bad. 1 is the management interface. We configured 2, 3, and 4, and we got IP addresses against them, so that's brilliant. Okay, I wonder if can we ping? Let's have a look. So ping, let's do 10.0.1.1. Let's see whether it's actually, yep, okay. And that is that's Manchester, so that's top. So that should be R1's interface. So show IP interface brief. Yep, 10.1.1, that's R1's. Okay, so there you go. Wasn't too bad. We didn't do badly on this one. We done a fair bit, to be honest with you. Let's go back to here. So we did successfully complete all the tasks. So we did create, or we reused an ansible host file for the routers. We did write a playbook, that will configure the loopbacks on routers 1, 2, 3, and 4. We created another playbook to verify the configurations, and we've reused that again. So we've used that twice now. We didn't build an interface YAML file because that would have taken forever. But we did look at the one that I had built previously. We've created a playbook that iterated over that actual file itself and added IP addresses, interface descriptions to multiple, basically 3 interfaces and the loopback as well on all the named routers, and brought them all into the upstate. And of course we verified it as well. So all in all, I think we've done very well in this particular session. I look forward to seeing you in the automation lab number 4. Thank you very much for your time.